Think back to the last time you turned on your stove, took a hot shower, or if you're like me, after the rain today, went home and cranked up the heat a little bit. All of these processes involve natural gas, most likely. Now consider the fact that here on Vanderbilt's own campus, our plant just switched from coal to natural gas. Natural gas is everywhere. It's in all of our lives. Now consider if the next time you turned on your sink, rather than water flowing out, you got some mixture of water and natural gas that, with a match, would light on fire, or that there were many micro explosions happening all around your home. This is happening all throughout the United States due to poor regulation of hydraulic fracturing to remove natural gas from the ground. Now, if you live in the Northeast, such as in Pennsylvania, in the Midwest, or in Texas, or even if you just travel regularly, like most of us probably do to get home, you've probably come into contact with some of this contaminated water. So today I'm going to explain to you how the federal government should increase regulation of fracturing in order to alleviate some of these harms. In order to see why this needs to be done, let's first go over the current situation, the harms associated with limited regulation, a proposed solution, and the arguments opposed to this increased regulation. In order to understand why more regulation is needed, we must first understand the current situation. But in order to understand this, we must first understand what even is fracking. According to the United States Geological Survey, hydraulic fracturing, or fracking as it's more commonly referred to, is the removal of natural gas and oil from the ground by injecting water and chemical fluids to pressurize the ground and increase fractures in the bedrock, allowing for the natural flow of these substances up to the surface. According to a survey by the Residential Energy Consumption by Energy Information Administration in 2014, 61% of all U.S. households use natural gas. So this means that this is occurring in almost every household in the United States. And as Mr. Firestone mentioned earlier, this is very important because natural gas is cleaner burning than coal and is important for the government and provides hundreds of thousands of jobs every year. So we can't do without it. Now we must understand what the current regulation is like in the United States, which is very limited. Under the Safe Drinking Water Act, there is an Energy Policy Act regulation enacted in 2005 that states that all chemical fluids injected into the ground in concurrence with natural gas extraction do not have to be regulated by the federal government. This means that these companies do not have to report what chemicals they're putting into the ground at all in any means. The second thing to understand is the harms associated with this limited regulation. The first set of harms are a set of environmental harms. So the chemicals that are being put into the ground are considered to be toxic, mutagenic, and carcinogenic under the Safe Drinking Water Act that was previously mentioned. These chemicals can then leak into the ground due to poor regulation of the casing around the fracture pipes and can then pollute streams or groundwater that you may be drinking out of, killing fish and disrupting the natural environment. According to the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, in a study done in Pavilion, Wyoming, citizens had been complaining of foul odor, taste, and color in their water, and so the EPA went in and did investigations and found that in fact this water was contaminated. And in a report released in 2011, determined that this contamination was due to fracking because the casing around the pipes did not extend down as deep as the groundwater well pipes. So the water being drawn up to the surface for drinking use was in contact with these fracking fluids. This is still an ongoing study, and the final report is supposed to be released this year. The United States Geological Survey also released a report last year that correlated earthquakes with the deep well fluid injection in these fracking sites in Oklahoma. Some of these earthquakes with magnitudes as high as 5.6, which with a scale going up to 8 is a very serious earthquake. The second set of harms to be addressed are health harms. In an EPA study between 2005 and 2007, Halliburton Company, Schlumberger Limited, and BJ Services and Company, which are major fracking organizations, were using chemicals in their fracking fluids that were considered toxic under the Safe Drinking Water Act, as well as injecting diesel into the ground, which is not safe. If you consider that 1.2 million wells are present in at least 32 states in the U.S., so that's 64% of states having these wells, according to the Coloradans for Responsible Energy Development Survey, these chemicals could be in most groundwater and most well water in the United States. And without regulation, there's no way to know where it's present. In a study by Cornell University in 2013, it was found that fracking was actually even affecting newborn children. Expectant mothers living within a 2.5 kilometer radius of these fracking wells, so as you can imagine, 2.5 kilometers is a pretty large radius, were having children that had increased low birth weights and decreased term birth weights on average. They also were being considered small for their gestational age and had adverse APGAR, or appearance, pulse, grimace, activity, and respiration results. So what this means for a newborn child to be underweight is that it doesn't necessarily have the nutrients and the calories available in order to promote healthy organ growth and brain development. This has been compared to cigarette studies and to lead poisoning studies from from the past. So, we were like, oh, cigarettes are healthy, they're fine, but as you know, they affect newborn babies before they're even born. The third set of harms that need to be addressed are social harms. The Director of Public Citizens Energy stated that increased spills from poor regulation threatens agricultural programs. And in a lot of these areas where fracking is occurring, agriculture is a main source of income for a lot of these families. So if you affect their agriculture negatively, how are they making money? Also, in a documentary called The Overnighters, the producer was studying the effects of these increased fracking booms on the community around them. And a lot of people would rush in to get jobs, but then find out that no affordable housing was available because the cost of living had risen so much. It also found in this documentary that people with felonies were able to get jobs making over $100,000 a year, whereas citizens in the community could not even find work or pay for their housing because of the increased living. So I ask you, is this fair that a felon or a registered sex offender can make over $100,000 a year, while honestly a lot of us who graduate from Vanderbilt will not even make that starting out? In a study by CNBC, because there's little regulation, in this past year alone, over 12 lawsuits have been filed against drillers by mineral rights holders because of lost revenue from burning of natural gas via flares. So what this means is that a lot of these companies come in to frack this land, but the infrastructure already set in place cannot maintain this much fracking, and a lot of the natural gas is not directed into the pipes, and then it's just burned off at the surface. A third of all of the gas produced is actually burned off, resulting in over $100 million a month in loss from these flares. This is a waste of money and is very dangerous to the environment because of the aerosols being released from the burning that otherwise were not necessary at all. These images of flares can even be seen from NASA and compare to cities such as Chicago's natural lighting from houses and stuff can be seen in the burning of this gas. Now imagine if that was from right outside your backyard because you couldn't contest that you had mineral rights to your property, so they frack there anyway. The third thing that I would like to do is propose a solution to this regulation problem, in which the federal government sets 4 minimum requirements for fracking. The first requirement would be to remove the Safe Drinking Water Act exemption from 2005. The second would be that all chemicals used in fracking fluids have to be reported to the EPA and USGS so they can release an annual report where the public can be made aware of the chemicals being injected into their ground. The third would be to have the EPA set a buffer zone around these fracking wells where the fracking sites cannot be set up within X meters of an already existing groundwater well. This would help ensure that groundwater being used in everyday use is a little bit safer for everyone drinking it. And the fourth minimum requirement would be that groundwater sampling be done before, during, and after each fracking event to ensure that the safety is still continued. This plan will work because it does not limit the states and what they can add. It just says they have to meet federal requirements and then can add their own regulations on top to add to and make it however they would like to tailor it. This is also all affordable if it has any cost at all. And according to a Wall Street Journal report by Jody Freeman from Harvard, who was the counselor for energy and climate change in the White House in 2009, the slight increase in money will actually be balanced by the increased trust from this increased regulation, meaning that there will be more investment in this capital event. Finally, there are 2 critical arguments in opposition to this increased regulation that must be addressed. The first argument by critics is that the states know best, and so they should be allowed to set their laws into place. But as can be seen, this isn't necessarily true. The State Review of Oil and Natural Gas Environmental Regulations, or STRONGER, is already in place for state-level reviews of current regulation. However, in a research report by the Center for Global Energy, International Arbitration, and Environmental Law, hazardous natural gas waste is usually reported by these states under different headings so that they can fly under the radar and not be regulated. So for example, Pennsylvania reports their natural gas waste as residual waste, and so therefore it's not regulated. Also, a lot of these states have very inconsistent regulations, and states such as Wyoming, where the Pavilion case was mentioned, have no regulation for the type of casing used around their gas fracking pipes, and they don't even have any regulation on if you can reuse these pipes at all, so faulty pipes may be reused. The second major argument against increased regulation is that the Frac Focus website is already in existence to allow these companies to report. So if reporting of the chemicals being used is already happening, why do we need to regulate it? However, of the 1.2 million wells in existence, only about 77,000 are registered on this website. So that means only 6% of wells in existence are reported. In a business analysis done by Forbes, Exxon was determined to be the #1 producer of natural gas in the United States, producing about 50% more than leading competitors. However, if you go on the Frac Focus website, you'll see that Exxon does not report. So that means that the producer of over half the natural gas in the United States is not reporting the chemicals they're using in the ground. So these chemicals could be leaking into your drinking water. In conclusion, more federal regulation is needed of fracking because of the toxic nature of the chemicals used, the poor job being done currently by the states to regulate, and to promote a safer future for American citizens. So next time you turn on your sink, be thankful that, at least for now, it's not going to catch on fire. Thank you.